everyone, this is Jane with Barlow Herbal, and happy Sunday, November 9th of 2025. Now, this has been a crazy week for me personally, but also a crazy week in the world, and as we know, the energies are moving super fast, and it's like holding on for the ride. So I have a ton of stuff in my journal that I journaled on with a main theme that kind of came in the very first week, and this has been something that's been flowing through me all year. But it seems like things, like I said, have been speeding up. So what I wrote first is, if you are aware, you've unlocked the most interesting level in the matrix, in the simulation. And I wrote that because I kind of touched on this last week, that this really, once you become aware and you can see that it is a simulation, it changes everything. And this week was just a super intense week for me on so many levels with so many things. And, so I wrote down some interesting thoughts, because what really came in for me were three main things, and that was freedom, sovereignty, and privacy. And these are things that have been super important to me my whole life. I grew up with parents who could see through the veil of what reality really is, and even though it wasn't quite as hardcore as things are now. In fact, it was quite different, but there was still that awareness and that knowing, just from the guidance of how my parents talked to each other, how they talked to us, and the way that they lived their life, and the things that they opted out of just while raising us. And that was, of course, I've said this so many times, but that was like the biggest gift that I think any human being that comes in during these times can get, is that layer. And it's interesting because while I got this gift along with all my massive group of siblings, there's only not all of us have the same awareness of things. So it's fascinating. It's been fascinating for me to watch and to participate in, right? So if you are aware, you've unlocked the most interesting level in the matrix. If you think about this as a game, it helps you play it differently, okay? So then I wrote this: there are lots of layers to awakening and awareness. And this is something we all know, because you have that first massive dump of awakening and you feel like the world has tipped upside down. Then you kind of go, okay, I see it for what it is. Your awareness of how things are kick in, and it kind of just becomes just peeling back the layers of all of the programs and lies and all of this stuff, right? And then you land in this place where you realize that you can and must plug back in and play the game differently. I don't know how many people that's listening to this can relate to that, because we do. We're here in the physical form, and we have to stay plugged in so that we can play. It always reminds me, when I even say something like that, of the movie The Matrix, where they have to plug back in to be able to go in and play the game so that they can ultimately gain their freedom, right? So then this came in. It can be different for everyone, how you plug in or how much, okay? Where each person is in their life, and when you realize it's all a game. And then I wrote, granted, a sophisticated one, because this is a very sophisticated game, okay? There is no doubt. Then you can act accordingly. You can still get hurt or even die in this game, but everything looks and feels different. Once you've had that, everything is different. And here's a little list of things that have definitely felt different for me. Money, that's a big one. Money feels completely different to me, but again, this is not brand new for me. One of the things that I read probably 20 or 25 years ago was the Jekyll Island, Escape to Jekyll Island, or it was how the Federal Reserve was created. And that is money. That is a big shift when you look at money differently, because most people have never heard that of that book. And I can't remember exactly, but I think it's Escape or Return to Jekyll Island or something like that. And then people and relationships. Okay, so let me go back. but everything looks and feels different. So money, people, relationship, TV, programs, and then cars, driving, and people. And I wrote people again because to me that's so huge. Just watching people walk through their lives, and there's not even an iota of an awareness. And I'm sure that people who've had spiritual awakenings over the centuries have always felt the same. And they've kind of been like, oh, I need to try to wake people up so we can all do this together and it'll happen quicker where we'll all be free. You know, it's really quite interesting. So that was a day. And then I wrote this the next day. For me right now, this is what I feel. My soul aches for freedom, sovereignty, and privacy. Okay, it's not to escape. This is what I've realized, because I've realized in a really dark thought, really, do you really escape if you take yourself out? Okay, so I'm not talking about at this place where I've landed freedom, sovereignty, and privacy as a means to escape. I want my freedom. I want to escape somewhere, go out in the middle of the woods without any technology, without any phones or connection, and forage my own food, and no one knows where I am. I'm not talking about escapism, okay? I'm talking about, at this point, what I've realized is all of these things now so that I can remember. And the awareness, the level of awareness, once you've peeled back all the layers, the level of awareness brings you to the point where you're like, I remember. Now I remember who I am. And even though you might hear it and say it, you might hear, or it lands in your soul, I am a divine spark of pure love and consciousness and God, the universe, all that is. And it lands in you. And you hear maybe that for the first time, and it causes a little something in your soul. And you feel that. That's a layer. Because then it has to land where you have a full remembering, okay? So it's not to escape, it's to remember. And here's what this feels like to me. It feels like I've recognized that much or most of what I've called life, and I put life in quotes, they're just invisible contracts, okay? And then I wrote social, psychological, and energetic. These are all just invisible contracts. Think about that. Think about that really, really thoughtfully for a second. Invisible contracts. Think about the things that they put on us and into us when we're babies, when we're born. You know, the social security number and the vaccines and all the stuff they put into us, the bad food, the numbing out, all of the things. Okay, think about that. These are social, psychological, and then there's the energetic thing. And I think there's a lot of religious constructs that fit into that energetic as well, and the social, and all of that, okay? It feels like my biggest desire is to live authentically. And then I wrote this, and unbound or unattached. So my biggest desire is not to have to be beholden to anyone, any system, any construct. That feels like my biggest desire. Freedom could mean unconditioned. So if you think about it, you still have to live in this matrix. You have to stay plugged in to take care of yourself, your family, and walk around the world taking care of business. Think of freedom as something where you've unconditioned yourself. You've taken away all the constructs. I recognize and realize that nothing owns me, no matter what happens. And it gives you this calmness and this clarity that's undescribable until you experience it, okay? I recognize and realize that nothing owns me. It reminds me a little bit of Viktor Frankl and his journey through the concentration camps and in A Man's Search for Meaning. That's a beautiful book. If you've never read it, I've read it several times, and it always has a deep meaning, because you realize that he recognized that nothing owned him. Nothing could own him, no matter what situation he was in. Most of us don't have to deal with that kind of a entrapment, enslavement of our human avatar, right? I can still participate in life and society. Okay, that's what to me what freedom means. I can still participate in this life, right? Because that awareness gives you this clarity, and there is something about peeling all the layers off and going taking your ego and going all the way down to stripping it of all of its bare bones. There's something so precious and beautiful in the freedom of that, just that. Okay, so I can still participate in life and society as a sovereign being who's unconditioned. Isn't that perfect? I can still participate. I'm sovereign and I'm unconditioned. That's so beautiful. And then I wrote, truly nothing, and I underlined nothing, owns me. I don't need approval. I don't need more money than what I need to survive. And I think we can even thrive. I believe that there's abundance for everyone, but I don't need it. It doesn't own me. The idea of getting more money and having more than those people, or a bigger house, or more cars, or fancy jewelry, that does not own me. Okay, that's freedom. Nothing truly owns me. Approval, money, ideology, or fear. Fear can't touch me. That is such a beautiful place to land. And then this, not even my past. Not even my past can own me. When you release that, because you can reframe your past. We can always reframe our past. And this is an important piece of living in the now, right? I get to choose. I get to choose all of these things. I no longer conform, but I get to clarify. I get to stay in clarity in how I walk through this world in every moment, right? And then I found this quote. It was an anonymous quote, but this: true freedom is not external permission. It's the restoration of inner authority. So isn't that beautiful? Okay, so true freedom is not external permission. No one needs to give me permission to be free. No, nothing external. No matter what anyone says to me or does to me, or forces me to do whatever with these constructs in this world we live in, okay? It's the restoration of inner authority. I get to choose how I respond and I react, right? So sovereignty, okay? Sovereignty is this is what this means to me. I am the one who chooses my inner experience. That's what true sovereignty is, okay? Even if I can't control the outer experiences. That's powerful. I choose how I respond, react, how I interpret, and how I create. And to me, that's super important, especially the create thing. I talk about that all the time because that's what brings us into our humanness, our creativity is so important. Whenever I enter, quote, quote, the system, like work and the different commerce, the stores, the relationships, whenever I enter into any of these things in the system, I don't forget who walks in. And you can practice this. Like you walk into a grocery store, don't forget who's walking into this. In fact, this is a really powerful exercise to do because if you do it on the simple things like walking into your car, walking into a grocery store, walking into a meeting, or any type of new relationship or situation, don't forget who walks in. Walk in with that awareness. You are giving yourself massive sovereignty because you always remember in the moment who you are. So perfect. It feels like I'm holding my consciousness like a crown. Okay, this was kind of really fun because it's not in any type of egotistical way. It's this. It gets to be quiet, it gets to be invisible, and it gets to be 100% mine. I don't have to say anything. I get to be a conscious, clear, divine spark of God and the universe. I get to be that, and I get to wear this like a crown, but it gets to be quiet. It gets to be quiet, right? Invisible and 100% mine. So then these thoughts on privacy. I've realized that it's not just my data or my solitude, okay? Because even though I have a little bit of a private or a public platform, it's not massive, which is really good for me. But I've realized that it's really not my data or my solitude because I love my privacy. But it's not about being alone. Okay, so let me show you how I expanded on this. It's a beautiful place where no one else's expectations, projections, or their noise can reach me. Okay, that's what privacy really is. And some of these situations that we find ourselves, especially with other people who are close to us, who try to invade that privacy with their noise, their expectations, their projections, they're projecting. None of that can reach me. That's true privacy. That's really, truly privacy. When I reclaim my privacy, feels like pure self-respect. This is just self-respect. And I will tell you, this is never more relevant in my life than now. It's things that are just, talk about the speed of things happening. Like I said at the beginning, you know, I hope you're there too. I really hope if you're watching this, if you're not exactly right there, that you will get there fast, because things are happening fast. I mean, I don't need to tell you that. Okay, so it's kind of like letting the mystery of who I am come alive again. This is what privacy is. Kind of like letting the mystery of who I am come alive again. You know, we're so used to sharing every single thing on social media. And then I wrote 2020, opting out of Facebook, etc., confirmed this for me. You know, I realized pretty quickly that I was done on mostly Facebook. I used to post quite a bit on Facebook. I'd post pictures of where I was traveling. I would post pictures of food I was eating. I would post pictures of me and my sisters, and you know, I was in there. I was in it pretty good. And then I started watching what was happening with people fighting with each other during 2020. And I think it was a couple months in, I tried to post positive things like, you know, just that's my style and that's who I am. And I was getting massive pushback, and so I was just like, this is hurting my soul. And so I opted out. And coming up at the beginning of, you know, kind of in the next few months, it's been 6 years since I opted out of sharing that type of information. And that's privacy. That's beautiful privacy. Okay, I get to choose, and this is really cool what came in. I get to choose who and what gets my attention. I get to say no without feeling guilty. This is a hard one until it lands in you and you start practicing that, because there are other energies, people, situations that will try to manipulate you, because you might be a kind, compassionate human, and you don't have to lose the compassion and the kindness. It's not about that. Okay, it's about protecting your privacy and saying no without feeling guilty. And this one, I get creative boundaries, okay? So think about this. There's 3 things: digital, emotional, and energetic. We get to have these boundaries that once we put them in place and start practicing, your circle might get really small, but this is where you get the beautiful realization that you are really comfortable being by yourself. And it's not about isolation or aloneness, because then you get to plug in completely different. They're plugging into the game with a different awareness. Then you get to attract, and this is what I said at the beginning. Basically what's happening is you have unlocked the most interesting level of this game that we are playing. And I would say the majority of human beings, it's definitely, of course it's the majority, the huge percentage, still have not unlocked it. They're still playing at different levels, and they're working their way through it. It's not my job to change anyone's level, to awaken them, to bonk them over the head and say, hey, look, here's the level, here's the door to it. It's not my job to do that, okay? And then I get to keep special things unshared, and then they can retain their energetic charge. Okay, I really, really love this, because I've realized after opting out of sharing social media like I used to, that there's a mystery to it, and they keep their energetic charge. There's something really special about a moment you share with somebody. Maybe it's a special meal, maybe it's a celebration of something, and you don't have to splash it all over social media, or even call or text or share photos about it, even with your close circle. There's something really beautiful about the things that you keep as a mystery, that they maintain this beautiful energetic charge. There's something really powerful to that. And you might not even realize it until you experience it. And it can be hard if you're used to that dopamine hit. You know, I'm not saying don't share things, especially if you're sending a text to your son with a great picture of whatever, right? Like I love getting pictures of my grandkids from my son or my daughter-in-law. You know, they're actually really good at keeping the mystery, I have to say. So then I wrote this: privacy feels like my power source right now. So that's what I mean as far as energetically. You maintain this powerful energetic force. So privacy feels like my power source right now. To be free, I don't have to be lonely, or I don't have to be a rebel. I don't have to be a rebel to be free. I don't have to go. I think it's good to stand up for our rights. Absolutely. This is a time when this is important. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about convincing other people, or, pulling away so far from everybody that now I'm just this lone wolf over here, not, connecting with anybody. I don't have to quote fight to be free. It's like connecting without being captive. Okay, so I get to connect, but I don't have to be captive. This honestly just again reminds me of Viktor Frankl. Okay, he was a captive for sure. Okay, and he stayed connected to his higher self. If you have not read that book, I'm going to just say again, it's a small book and it's powerful. And then here's the thing that I wrote: I don't have to fight the game. This game is the game. It's here. We're in it, and we're in it to win it. But we don't have to fight it. Okay? I just need to remember that I am free. I just need to remember I'm in the game and I'm free. I need to remember, and then I need to maintain that, because sometimes it's easy to forget, and then you remember again. You go like, oh, I really nothing or no one owns me. I'm really free. So then I wrote this: if I need someone to validate or praise, so I need to remember to maintain that. I'm not. This is a very uneven flow. So I just wrote: if I need someone to validate or praise, okay. If I'm afraid of being alone, if I have a lot of mental clutter. So think about the things that are mental clutter. Our thoughts, number one. Freaking mental clutter, right? The labels. I am this. I am that. I am, these labels are crazy mental clutter. The ideologies, mental clutter, right? And it's not just another cage, because what happens is you might awaken into an awareness of something, and then you put yourself into an ideology or an alternate spiritual belief, and you're just giving yourself another cage. It's just a different cage, okay? And it's not really true awareness. I wrote that, not really true awareness. And then I wrote: if I stay addicted to information, consuming more than I create, that's a whole nother layer, right? Just being aware of these things gives me liberation. Just being aware of these things. All these things give me liberation, okay? In fact, let me just go over those really quick. Just being aware of these things gives me liberation. If I need someone to validate or praise me, okay, I'm aware that I every once in a while I still might, but I'm like, do I really? Okay? If I'm afraid of being alone, if I have a lot of mental clutter, if I stay addicted to information, which is consuming more than I create. Okay, really think about that. We're all consumers, and there is so much information out there to consume. It's insane. So much. Unbelievable. So if you are consuming more than you are creating, let's flip that, because I still think it's okay to consume and consume information, especially if it uplifts us and helps us add layers of awareness and kind of go, no, consuming that doesn't feel right. Like, I find it very, very difficult to go to the movie theater and watch a movie. I've been to a couple here and there throughout this year with a couple of family members, a few of my sisters, and I think besides the movies for the most part are pretty bad. You realize the programming that's in there, and I can't even consume most things on a movie in my own home unless it's a really old movie that just feels like it's just trying to entertain me without programming me, right? So then I'm going to finish with this, okay? And this is my idea of living ultimate freedom just day to day, okay? So just think about this. So from my perspective, really true freedom, it doesn't have to look like something dramatic. In fact, I think for the most part, every single human being that has been on a journey through this life, through all these centuries, that really craves freedom and sovereignty and privacy, It's a within. It's an inside job. We've heard that a million times, right? It can be subtle, silent, and even just plain ordinary. Nobody even has to know. Okay, so here's a couple things that have really landed with me, and I've been doing this especially the last month. Wake up without rushing. I've always been an early riser, and I love starting my day off watching the sun rise up over the mountains, starting my tea, having the house and the kitchen quiet and all to myself. But the last month, I've really woken up. I've enjoyed the warm covers. I've gotten extra comfortable. Sometimes I'll get up and use the bathroom, but then I'm like, okay, I'm going to get back in because I know the warm bed is there. And so I've really paid attention to the lusciousness of waking up without rushing. And I know some of us have schedules and jobs where we need to be at a certain time, but there might be some days when you don't have to wake up and rush. And I think that that's a really, really nice thing to put into your day. And it doesn't have to be an hour. It can be 10 minutes or 5 minutes, okay? Move your body because it feels alive, not because you're supposed to. This is one thing that I've always loved, moving my body and exercising. I grew up with parents who had us outside and hiking, and we were always playing outside and always moving our body just because. And then I fell into exercise and into the gym when I was 18 years old. So this has always been an important thing to me. And now that I'm a little bit older and all of these awarenesses and things are landing, just the movement of my physical body is just simply something that is like, this feels like sovereignty and freedom. And part of that is when we are healthy and we take care of this physical body, that alone is sovereignty and freedom, right? And then create something daily, even if it's small, purely for myself. Just create something for myself. It doesn't have to be something big. In fact, I've started playing around with different teas. I'm a big tea drinker. And what I've been doing is I have a whole drawer full of different teas. And I've been actually mixing them. So I'll make a cup of tea. And instead of one tea bag, I'll put 2 tea bags from 2 different types of teas. And that might sound like a weird thing, but that's an ordinary small thing that I'm getting creative. How do these 2 teas taste together, right? And then speak truth gently without needing agreement. So I can speak my truth and I don't need anyone to agree with me. And I don't have to speak it loudly or argumentatively. If I just speak my truth quietly and gently, I don't have to have agreement. And honestly, this is where a journal has really come in, because sometimes we need to get things out, and speaking our truth that might trigger someone else, or maybe they'll just disagree with you and want to start a discussion. And I'm not talking about having a conversation, maybe a fun conversation. I'm talking about the things that might trigger someone else or cause an argument, and we don't need agreement. We just need to speak our truth authentically and gently, right? Step away from the systems, media, the gossip, the groupthink especially, that feed on our attention. Even watching this is your attention. And hopefully there's some nuggets of things that you can take into your day, into your week, and bring you into an awareness in this beautiful rise in consciousness, right? And then we need to remember that every moment we choose presence over programming. What happens is we reclaim all of that territory for us, for our soul. We get to reclaim that every single time we choose, right? And then freedom becomes our default when life can no longer force you to forget who you are. Once you drop into that remembering, it's there. And it might wiggle out sometimes, but you get to rein it back in, okay? And then here's the final layer of this. And what I wrote here is freedom. Think about freedom as a union. So this is like a union. At the deepest level, ultimate freedom is not separation, not going out into the woods by yourself, having privacy, not talking to anyone on the phone, none of that, okay? It's union. When you are no longer bound by your ego, your fear, or your identity, you realize that sovereignty and oneness, they can coexist together. Okay, we can be in unity and have our privacy and our sovereignty. We can be in connection with our fellow humans. And the most brilliant thing is to connect on a high level with other awakening awareness souls, other souls who are there. We both so we get to become free in the world, not from the world. We don't have to be free from it, but we get to be free while we're in it. That feels like beautiful mastery to me. What we have is we can move more lightly, and everything that we touch becomes magical and almost in a way like luminous, right? You know, when I go on my walks and all the leaves are changing and falling, sometimes, especially like yesterday, I went on my walk and the leaves are just insane. And sometimes some wind will come in and a whole bunch of leaves will shower down on me. That happened yesterday. And it was almost like magical and luminous, and I'll touch a branch of leaves as I'm walking by, and you get to really look at things differently. So here's how I'm going to end this. Okay, so this is what seems like a paradoxical completion of awakening. The sovereign self merges seamlessly with the greater whole. Okay, isn't that amazing? Not because you're submitting, right? But because you are participating in what I like to call divine freedom. This is divine freedom. I think that, seriously, I would love to know what you think about this. There's, like I said, so many matrixy things went on in my life this week. And there's some things that I'm not ready to share, but some really big, heavy if you look at them. But then when your perspective changes and you realize you're a player and you have unlocked this interesting level, it's unbelievable how it shifts for you. Because I will tell you, one of the biggest things that will leave you is fear that anyone can hurt you, or anyone owns you, or anyone can punish you. You're a sovereign being. It's like that. So, all right, guys. Well, I appreciate you tuning in today. I hope that your second week of November of 2025 is beautiful and brilliant. And think about those words and maybe reframe them: freedom, sovereignty, and privacy. But thanks for tuning in today, guys, and we will see you next time.